Hi, Scott Orlin with CINEMA-Magazin. There is a new series coming your way called Valley of Tears, and I am here with the parents, so to speak, of the series, Leshem and Amit Cohen. Congratulations!
Thank you.
You set this series in one of the most famous battles or wars in Israel's history, the 1973 Yom-Kippur War. Why this particular battle? Why do you think it lent itself to this drama?
So, it's a war that changed the Middle East forever, and it's a war that changed Israel forever. And yet, unlike Vietnam for Americans, we're practically never talking about it in our homes with our parents. It was a moment where we were standing just before total destruction in a way. But it's an untold story, and it's the first series ever done on that. So, and a lot of when we're touring with it worldwide, everyone is just saying, "Well, it's the biggest production in the history of Israeli television." Yeah, it is, but the more the heartbreaking thing for us to admit is the fact it's a story that we were as kids. It's a trauma that we were not allowed to talk at home about. It was that heavy burden for our parents. But because we grew up on such an incredible, on so many incredible films, war films in the U.S., the one thing we wanted to do is to find the compelling stories and conflicts and war dilemmas that you've never seen in any other films and series. And it's quite easy when it comes to the IDF in Israel because it's a very strange. It's a totally different war, totally different than what you know here. Because basically, I mean, you can be an accountant or a teacher or whatever or a lawyer, hearing the air raid siren. An hour later, you are killing and being killed in the front lines. So it's a kind of a very different war that we were telling about, and it's a wound because it was a moment that the first Israel was dying and a new Israel was born, and we were trying to ask, was it? I mean, was it for good or for worse?
But what's really interesting is in this story, you combine historical footage with fictional characters. Talk a little bit about your creation of these fictional characters, because some of them are archetypes, of certain types of people, whether you have like the radio guy who's afraid and scared. Talk a little bit about how central it was to create that balance.
I think we came to the process with a lot of responsibility because of the importance of it, and because so many people are still living among us, people who fought there. I mean, we knew how sensitive there'll be. The first thing we did was to complete it. I think the most extensive research we've ever done. Both of us were journalists and familiar with doing research. For months we went to sleep, by knowing where every tank was stationed in the battlefront. We knew all the slang, all the words tank teams used. We knew practically everything on both sides. We interviewed people. We went to small museums that are dedicated only for armored corps. Once, only when we felt that we were extremely comfortable with reality, we set to define the drama, because at the end it's not a documentary and it's not even a docudrama. It's a TV show, and we must follow all the dramatic rules, and which means that we wanted to focus on characters. We wanted to focus on their emotional journeys, on their psychological journeys. We wanted to tell stories of friendship, how friendship is created, how friendship is destroyed, what happens when you take three best friends and you throw them into an extreme situation, like the Black Panthers. And around it, we wanted a backdrop of the war, the backdrop of changes in Israeli society. The thing is, and we knew it right from the get-go, that especially for an Israeli audience, it could be very confusing, especially because it feels very realistic. People look at the characters and they start seeing themselves, and they measure everything. The first thing Israelis ask almost after every scene: did it really happen? Was there really a pilot his plane was shot down and he was rescued while the others were left behind? Is the conversation between an intelligence analyst and a Syrian officer really happened? The answer is yes. All of them some sort of these events happened, but we were inspired by them. We didn't try to take real characters and say, okay, this is, we have a name for each one. Many of the characters are a mixture, a hybrid of real people. But at the end, it's a story. It's a fictionalized story of that is inspired by true events.
Speaking and by the way, just to say, it's our parents out there, ourselves are there. I mean, Amit's father is a kind of Avinoam, the nerdy guy from the intelligence who was shouting, "You are wrong." Amit's father was this guy, and we were serving as intelligence officers in that unit. So it was we grew up on this myth. But at the same time, each of us chose his own alter ego, and we just collected those stories that we felt needs to be told.
I think, and again, you mentioned about real people. I could be taking a leap of faith here, but when I first saw Lior Ashkenazi on there, I thought, oh my God, it's Gerard Depardieu. And I was wondering if there was some little tip of the hat in the way his hair to acknowledge that.
Yeah, well, that was one of the inspiring characters behind his. It was a time where the 60s just arrived to Israel. For the first time, we had this vibe of the 60s, and our journalists and authors suddenly became more into social justice and orgies and drugs or whatever. And suddenly we were just about to have elections for the first time on healthcare and social justice and everything that is important. And suddenly the war broke out, and it all changed in a second. So, but that was the inspiration. The incredible thing is that it wasn't what made us so happy in the past few weeks since the premiere in Israel was not the fact that it broke all records when it comes to rating for the public broadcasters, or how it is a kind of a must-see, because you have, and after every episode you have, and within 4 days, over 1 million views on VOD, for example, which is something that never happened in Israel. It's never like so intense, and we only have, I think, 5 to 6 million people, Hebrew-speaking viewers in Israel. We're tiny. But what was so important for us is the fact that people are constantly, there are thousands and tons of thousands of people trying to find themselves, their parents, their families within the stories, and are sure it's about them. And it turned out to be something more than just a TV series.
What's really fascinating is, like, I don't know, maybe in the past 10 years where I've seen Israeli projects, to the outside world, there is constant conflict, there's hostility. And yet, even in your series, you explore this, even while there is a contrast of culture, Palestinians, Israelis, what do you call it? There seems to be a commonality there, the olive branch. People are trying to get along. How important was that element in telling your story?
Yeah, it's a kind of, and we're asked a lot about the other side. I mean, what is our statement? Because everything that comes out of Israel, everyone is looking for the politics behind it. The politics today, politics is, even when I'm trying to convince the audience to show compassion and empathy, that sounds like politics. And we are doing in this show something that is it's a national reckoning for Israel, when we are trying to ask. And by the way, that's the moment when the show was created. We found a speech by a young officer who told his young soldiers after the most horrific battle. He told them, "I can just promise you one thing: after this war, we are going to be a better country, better people, be better human beings. I promise you this," because we had so many scenes. So our idea to go on this journey was to check ourselves today. Are we better people? Are we? So it's totally a social thing, this story. The war in it it brings great conflicts, and it's a history that needs to be told, but it's all about the Israeli society, basically, I think.
We have Shonda Rhimes, Ryan Murphy, David Kelly, these giants in the television industry who are so prolific of what they're doing. I have to tip the hat to you guys too, because for a small country like Israel, you guys have been not only prolific in content in Israel, but in transferring that to other shows. Euphoria, I know before that, I think In Treatment was something that came from Israel. There's other shows now. We were just mentioning before, you signed a deal in England, you're doing something new. Talk a little bit about what is it about the Israeli creative process that is allowing these shows to now have an extended life in other countries?
I think that in a way, what we see in Valley of Tears is the evolution of what started the Israeli television. The fact that we couldn't do until recently a show like Valley of Tears. We couldn't do a show with tanks and explosions and visual effect. The budgets were very limited. So we were forced, Israeli creators were forced to focus on the conflicts, on characters, without using crutches of helicopters and explosions and enormous budgets. The other thing is that Israelis are super neurotic. The events, when you're doing drama, you must compete with reality, which forces you to come up with new stories, with original stories. I think both these elements led to the fact that Israeli writers were able to create something that feels very universal, because it's focused not only on Israeli conflict, it's focused on human conflict and human drama. But at the same time be still edgy and realistic, which is something very important for Israeli audience. And after doing it, I think Ron and we've been doing it for more than 10 years, and between ourselves, I think we created 5 shows. It led to the fact that finally we can do the major shows in Israel, like Valley of Tears, with the experience that we already got of focusing on characters.
But Ron,
and by the way, I just think that the edgy mainstream thing is like, it's really unique to Israel, because you want to do the edgy because Israelis are so neurotic, but at the same time, the only way you have some kind of financial sense is if you are getting into 30% ratings. So you have to be mainstream, and you create something that is an edgy mainstream. It's always edgy. And we're always working in a mess. Everything is a mess. We don't have algorithms. We're trying, we're daring. And that creates something. At the same time, because our brothers and sisters who are successful in the industry of high tech and startups, they showed us the way to not to be stuck in this tiny country that is small in the New Jersey. We want to break free, break out. Usually when we meet our friends in Swedish writers, they don't have the urge to go out. They want to, nothing forces them to go out. And because Israel is, in a sense, it's poor and it's tiny, we were always exploring the way we created Korean shows. We love the idea of how this industry is becoming globalized. And we were lucky enough to work in India and Morocco and Russia and the US and Australia and New Zealand and Korea, creating shows. This is one of the beautiful things that is happening in the TV industry, I think.
I just want to specifically talk about, I know, Ron, you helped create it and you're overseeing the US version of Euphoria. It just won an Emmy Award for your lead actor. I think you're about to start season 2 in this pandemic era. Talk a little bit how important a story like that is to get out there. We do have 2 one-offs coming out soon, and the pandemic was kind of stuck in the middle of a moment before filming the 2nd season. The thing is, we were fighting for 6 years to try and convince someone in the US to believe in Euphoria, and it was almost impossible. We were always guided. Like, we had, I think, around 20 networks passing on it, and they were always saying it should be more of a it should be more of a kind of comedy. It should go on the path of Skins, the British one. No one believed in that DNA and look and feel and tone, and we were so fortunate and lucky to have this incredible creative team of Sam Levinson, who is brilliant in bringing himself into it, as well as A24 and Drake and everyone, and especially the idea that HBO, that Casey and Francesca just believed in this and gave it a chance. Now, I have to admit, for us, what drove us to fight for it was just the fact that when we used to come to the US, we were always asked, okay, what is the next espionage story? I was working as an executive on the Homeland Prisoners of War project, and I was always asked, okay, what's your next terror/espionage story? And we just wanted to do something else and to touch the things that we always dreamed of when we were dreaming of
being filmmakers. This is the thing we wanted to do. It's kind of a train spotting meets kids, Gus Van Sant. It was a kind of a vision that it was incredible for us just to see this brilliant team taking over and bringing his own both inspiration and interpretation to it. It's a huge gift for us.
And a last question for the two of you. As a worldwide audience now is going to take this glimpse into Valley of Tears, what do you hope they take out from that, other besides being entertainment, of a different appreciation or a different interpretation about Israel?
Ron, you want to start?
I think there's so many themes there that are timely. Even the fact that the whole idea for us was it's about a group of kids that were trying to shout, "You were wrong. You're not seeing the catastrophe that is coming." And no one had listened to them, and the generals were hiding this from the prime minister. We had a woman prime minister, Golda Meir, and the generals were just hiding these warnings from her. And we felt that a lot of the themes, even the idea of we trusted our leaders and we were wrong, is something really relevant. Now, we grew up as intelligence officers. Amit and I met there 25 years ago as intelligence officers, and we were taught to say you were wrong, to approach your commander or the senior commander or chief of staff of the army and say you are wrong. And that's something that we thought that is more relevant today than it ever was. But at the same time, we're dealing in this story with social injustice and so many other themes that we felt that are really relevant. But when it comes to Israel, we meant to create a reckoning, national reckoning for the Israeli audience. And we never thought of approaching it globally. And now that in so many countries, and thanks God, at HBO Max, we're getting such incredible, compelling response. We get that there is something universal maybe in it.
Well, Toda Rabah, thank you both very much. The show is really incredible. I encourage everybody, if you get a chance, to want to see it. It's called Valley of Tears. Ron and Amit, thank you so much. And this is Scott. Until next time.